introduction of ANAC, which was one of the initial policy recommendations that came out of the Royal Commission, it has created an illusion of continued and upward revenue growth through indexations. This was emphasized through those multiple indexations that were paid out from October of 2022. As a result, February saw revenue growth trends return to a plateauing effect with slight funding reverses felt across the sector. The industry settled backwards 33 cents to $267.71 a day in average daily subsidies. Total claim activity rebounded to a high of between the 6 to 7% band of total claims being assessed by AMOs over February. Voluntary claiming also recovered across February, increasing by nearly 0.75% on average and ending up at the upper bound of the typical monthly reclassification mark. The improvements in AMO activities led to a reduction in the age of ANAC claims within Medicare, with all facility types reducing their population of residents whose ANAC claim is greater than 12 months in age. However, as ANAC can evoke a do-nothing strategy, we are seeing the average age of claims greater than 12 months in age continue to hover around the 60% watermark. This remains about 10% higher than what we reported during the ACFI years. With the positive growth trend being experienced with occupancy across the sector, February remained consistent even with the additional day provided in our leap year. Modified Monash 5 and specialist homeless facility types benefited well beyond the sector's performance. It has been a tough ride since the media locked onto aged care, starting a downward cycle in occupancy in early 2017. However, just as public sentiment seemed to be shifting, a second headwind hit in the form of a slow uptake in capital projects undertaken by providers. Now, with ACAR rounds continued issuing bed licenses, the slow uptake in development put pressure on the available bed licenses in the market. Uncertainties also around the impending Royal Commission findings and the following reforms meant that many providers continued to put their development programs on hold as new licenses were being issued. At the same time, the media storm followed by an increase in home care packages, but without the funding allocations, and then a pandemic. It all led to a significant headwind which impacted the public's perception of pursuing residential aged care for their loved ones. As a result, occupancy levels experienced a 5-year decline. However, since February of 2022, we have been experiencing an upward trend cycle that continues to gain momentum each month. These occupancy gains have also been noted in supporting the surplus in profits which providers are benefiting from at this time. How long will this continue? Well, I believe the probabilities of a trifecta of adverse scenarios which played out over that period is a once-in-a-100-year event, but I'm not a gambling man. Short-stay residents regained what they lost last month, jumping back up to a quarter of all consumers staying in care for less than 6 months. And new permanent respite admissions also slowed over February as residents and their families appeared to seek alternative options. And the profile of a residential admission is a slightly older 85-year-old resident. Well, with many providers experiencing their first department audits on their QFR care minute submissions, we have seen some slight adjustments in reported care time. The total direct care minutes came back slightly over February, achieving around the 203 mark. And with 8 months remaining before the newly mandated industry average lifts to 215 minutes, further investment in rosters will be required. That is, unless providers adjust their care minute demand setting strategies, which is code for funding maximization. Now remember, providers set their care minutes through their claiming strategies under ANAC. But unlike previous funding models, providers now are accountable to provide the supply side of those mandated care minutes from the rosters at each of their services. So it makes sense to ensure that the same teams are across both sides of that equation. Otherwise, you'll be out of bounds and pay for it. And lastly, RN minutes continue to perform slightly below the anticipated 40-minute industry average, but moving in the right direction.